So we've covered language reluctancy, we've covered writing resistance. Now, what about reading? What about these lovely novels that come with LLATL and your child doesn't want to read or can't read or struggles to read or is in tears over reading? There's a few ways to approach this. The one is, for starters, we're hoping that you've placed your child into the LLATL program in the right place. In other words, not too far ahead or behind, where they're going to get bored with the reading because it's so immature or beneath their skill level, or it's too difficult. There are placement tests and assessments on the Oikos site for you to do so that you can ascertain their reading level and their language skill level. So presuming you've done that, now what you would do is you would have pegged them at their reading level. And you might find that you've chosen to put them in a little bit below their reading level so that they can get their grammar all caught up, because maybe they haven't quite got that right and they've got gaps or whatever it might be. And that's okay. Then the child can understand, I'm reading these books that are below my level at the moment because I'm needing to get my language skills to match. And then that should be all right if they have understanding and you've shared that with them. If you've put them in too high up in the program and they just can't cope, well, then you're going to just have to peg it down a bit and actually keep that book for later on when they're ready for it, and then get the level below. But let's presume you've done all that. Now you've still got a child that's just generally struggling to read. I know all about that because our daughter really, really, really struggled to read. This is what I did. I read the LLATL book to her, read it to her. Instead of getting her to read it back to me, which she just couldn't manage to do, as I've shown you in the previous clip, she didn't write in her LLATL book, and she didn't read the books either. I read them to her, so she was still getting the entire language experience. But you might ask, but what about her reading, and what about teaching her? And you can't just leave her not to be able to read. And I agree. So what I did is I found the McGuffey books to be very useful in this instance. The more McGuffey readers. It starts with the first story being a few lines long with big letters and starting right from the basics and taking the child from McGuffey book 1, 2, 3, 4 up to university level of literature. Now, those McGuffey books are specifically designed to go one little inch at a time, whereas if you look at LLATL, the readers, it's going at that skill level and hopping up to the next skill level and then hopping up to the next and so on. Whereas the McGuffey books are literally line by line, story by story. It's just incrementally, just slowly creeping the student along and adding starting with the 300 most commonly used vocabulary words in the English language and then adding to it like that very, very slowly. So we used those. That was helpful. It didn't make reading suddenly easy. Reading was still a struggle. So again, what did I do to counteract that? I worked with helping her to learn to read, but I also read volumes to her, read the book for her, had her sit next to me, and I moved my finger along the line so she could see whereabouts I was reading and just follow along with me in the hopes that maybe she'd pick up some skills that way. But my goal was for her to have pleasure and enjoy and see the value of literature and the value of learning to read, specifically so she could read the Word of God. That was my main objective. But the fact is that I made it as pleasant as possible, at the same time knowing that there was a reading problem, a reading difficulty. I don't like to call it a problem, because let me tell you what happened. Just like our son, who was reluctant to learn languages, ended up blessing us in the way that he did by the time he got all the way through. Our daughter at age 12, 13 suddenly started being able to read with more ease than she had up until that point. By 14, she was going to her LLATL books that I had read to her, taking them off the shelf and reading them herself. And she read Farmer Boy, and this was like a fat book, and she was so amazed that she could actually read it and that she was able to do that. And she just continued from there on and just devoured the books, loved reading. So here we had a 14-year-old starting with the yellow readers from LLATL and just gobbling them up and really enjoying the process. So yes, she wasn't reading well. Yes, it was a struggle all the way up until then. But in all that time, we were not allowing the struggle to result in tears, despondency, and a hatred, actually, for that particular subject that we were busy learning together. So I can't go into all the science of learning difficulties and how to approach them and all the different mechanisms and all the different tools you can add to help with a student who's struggling to read. I can only share with you what we did, how we did it, why we did it. I just believe that in every instance I wasn't going to apply what was the method to fix this, because that didn't suit our environment. When I say didn't suit, it didn't work for our circumstances, our environment. So I couldn't go with the solution of taking her to various different therapies, because you don't do that when you've got a child that's having blood infusions and you're treasuring every moment. And some of our most treasured moments were read aloud. And so I gave her volumes and volumes and volumes of read aloud, and consequently it resulted in what it did, and that is a love for reading and a passion for literature. I believe so, and I also believe that I can't leave God out of this. I can't leave the Lord out of it, because He is the one that directed our path. He is the one that showed us each step of the way what to do about these difficulties and how to overcome them. We have done another series called Pain to Pearls, and which is also on the website if you wanted to go and look into more detail about actual learning difficulties and how we went through those challenges and how we felt that we were victorious in them because of Christ and because of His guiding and leading. And so I hope that's given you some help with reading difficulties that you might be encountering. I would like you to relax and really not stress too seriously over it. I understand your heart of wanting to be responsible to see to it that your child can read. But really, I hope that this has helped in some way, just to maybe perhaps view the whole struggle in a different way. See it as a challenge, a purpose, and a reason for you to actually spend more time on putting more effort into making this particular thing as much fun and relaxed and enjoyable as possible.